Welcome to Counsel Culture, the Business of Law podcast brought to you by Byfield. Welcome back to Counsel Culture. I am with you today with Ben, coming to you live from some rather fancy new equipment. Hi Ben, how are you?
I'm good, thanks Lindsay. I'm sitting here rather excited in what I will describe as our studio. We have invested in some quite nice kit, some microphones and a mixer and some other wires and stuff. And I'm trying to block the 4-year-old boy in me from pressing all the buttons I can see in front of me, actually focusing on the podcast. But I'm good. Still really cold, but at least it's stopped raining.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful day today. And I appreciate you not fiddling with any of this because it's taken me a while to get to grips.
I'm trying not to. I'm sitting on my hands.
But it's never too late to learn a new skill. So here we are. So we are going to have a chat through some news stories today. But how have you been? Because you've been over in the States this month, haven't you?
Yeah, no, I've not been on since I've been back. So I was in New York and DC very early in the month, doing my usual sort of visit to clients and contacts and things. And I literally travelled on the day the Iran strikes started, which made me rather nervous in the air. But the mood music was strange, and I've written a blog on it today. Just in terms of the unpredictability of the regime, whatever your politics is, affecting law firm leaders. Forecasting, knowing what's going to happen next, planning for the next year, all that stuff is proving very, very difficult at the moment. And there is a slight resignation, I think, that every day is very different and not necessarily in a good way. So it was a good trip, as it always is, but quite a kind of a somber mood. And how's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a busy one for Team Byfield. We have been supporting a group of 62 former Vodafone franchisees. I'm actually going to drop in a bit of audio from catching up with Millie, who works on the apostrophe count. She's going to tell you a little bit about it. Hi, this is Lindsay. I am currently standing with Millie. We have an exciting day ahead of us. Millie, where are we?
We are currently at the High Court outside the Rolls Building in London with around 20 of the former Vodafone franchisees involved in the group action against Vodafone.
I can see some balloons, I can see banners, I can see a megaphone, lots of people wearing Justice for Vodafone franchisee t-shirts. What have you been doing? You were very busy yesterday, right?
We have been working with these claimants over the past couple of months, preparing for a series of events over these couple of days. Yesterday we were in the Palace of Westminster, and we met with 14 MPs to discuss the cause for fairer franchise and reform in the way that franchising is regulated, and looking towards a better future for franchising in the UK. We then headed to Vodafone HQ, where we handed over a signed letter from those same MPs we met with.
What did the letter say? What was the contents of the letter?
It included a series of unanswered questions that Vodafone have not been able to put real, meaningful answers to. Those questions sit outside the legal claim, and they go to issues of governance and accountability and lack of transparency.
This is obviously a hugely emotional moment for the franchisees, and this campaign is something that Byfield's been supporting on for a long time now. What are you hoping happens today once everybody goes into court?
I think, as you say, it is hugely emotional for the people involved, and so much of what we're doing today is about the way that it builds them up and their morale. And this has been a long time coming for them, and it can feel really laborious and tiring, and these people need one another just as much as they need legal accountability from Vodafone. It's about a shared experience that they've all been a part in, and to see people sort of feel empowered by what we're doing here today and what we did in Westminster yesterday is just something really important to see and witness.
Okay, so back onto our news stories for this week, and I thought we could kick off with the rather fantastically named Cobra and Kim. This is one that you spotted, Ben, in The Lawyer, and it's by Elena Pofo. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, and I do think they have got the coolest name in the legal sector. That's Cobra and Kim. They are a litigation, well, they're described as a litigation boutique, but they've got, I think they've got 15 global offices, which doesn't feel very boutique-y. But they've got what I think is a fantastic, almost business development go-to-market, that they rely a lot on referrals. And their policy is that if they get a referral from an intermediary or a law firm, they will only do one piece of work for that client because they don't want to take anyone else's lunch. And I think it's a great approach, and it's very, very confident. And it seems to have, they opened here 15 or so years ago, I think in 2000 and 2010, and they're doing really well. They're not a firm that you hear too much about, but they're way of taking on work and making sure that they don't upset anybody that may give them work, I think is great. You know, all too often you see law firms being a bit short-termist in the way that they kind of grab business without thinking, you know, over long-term relationships and things. And you don't necessarily equate, litigators with that kind of collegiate, considerate view always, maybe. But I think they're doing a really, really good job. And it just caught my eye, not least because they got a very cool name.
Yeah, and it allows them to kind of play in the space of conflict as well. They work in partnership with some of these larger firms. When they're conflicted, you imagine that, you know, they're the first people they call to pass on that work.
Right, because they know that the firms that refer them work know that they're not going to try and, as I said earlier, eat their lunch. I think it's a really refreshing model.
And next up, Kirkland hitting the headlines again this week. This time, a story in law.com, which looks at the broader market of PE practice hiring.
Yeah, I think there's just an outstanding stat in there that Kirkland pretty much have, 4 to 5 times as many mandates as any other law firm. I think Latham are in second. So Kirkland have 5,024 big ticket private equity mandates. That's a couple of years, and Latham are next with 1,488. That's huge. I mean, if you look at any competitor analysis in legal or anywhere else, to have the front runner that far ahead of everybody else is really, really, really quite something. No wonder they are turning over, 11 million pep or whatever it might be. Quite extraordinary, really. But I think what's really, really interesting about this story isn't so much the headline numbers, but it's actually the point that a couple of commentators make, notably Sarah Morris from McRae, who talks about the fact that firms are reshaping some of their remuneration structures to build them around private equity partners and private equity teams. So they are literally looking at their remuneration, the way they're structured, and building that around private equity, which is quite something. We read a lot about people ramping up in certain areas, hiring partners and everything else, but you don't kind of think that, the basic infrastructure of the firm will change as a result. Makes you question what will happen when we have the inevitable dip in PEs we did just after the credit crunch. And I'm sure better minds than mine have planned for that and are hedged accordingly. But very, very stark, and not just least that headline number.
Yeah, and Morris makes an additional point that despite these hires, it has slowed. So the pace is that even though it's slowed, it's still reaching these levels, which is quite something. But yeah, I mean, given everything that's going on at the moment, I think it's only inevitable we see a downturn. But who's to say they won't carry on this trajectory?
So I agree. But if you rewind, it might seem a long time to some listeners, but sort of 15 years or so ago, private equity was a sort of niche, quirky practice in a lot of firms. Very relationship driven, very kind of enclosed. And now it's shaping remuneration strategies of multi-billion dollar firms. That's a lot of change in a short period of time.
Next up is a piece from Susie Ring for the FT, looking at how AI is reshaping the business of law. I think this topic is touching practically every aspect of the business of law at the moment, but this piece is particularly interesting. It's an interview with a barrister, a clinical negligence barrister, about how they are using AI to help them essentially get to grips with some of the most complex subject matter. I just found it fascinating.
Yeah, it's a pretty big piece, isn't it? It was published by Susie earlier this week. There's a lot of fascinating detail about how the medical profession works and how AI works in it, particularly obviously in investigations where things go wrong, and it's worth reading. I don't think we can go into that in a huge amount of depth now, but Susie definitely moves on to law firms and their usage of AI as well. And she talks about the fact that, and I have heard this from other sources, that, law firms are buying big ticket AI software, not necessarily because they're going to use it brilliantly well, but because they need to be seen to have it. And it's kind of a hygiene thing. And that is quite interesting, that. And if you rewind, a few years when AI first came in, the usage of it was something that you were very kind of discreet about, and perhaps a little bit nervous in terms of the optics of clients knowing that a lot of their work, be it due diligence or e-discovery, was done by AI. And now perhaps firms, they need to kind of oversell their usage of AI to look as if they're in tune with the times, which is quite a big paradigm shift.
And I think some of the so the uptake of the tools and the adoption rate, as it were, is perhaps, as you say, not as high as the adoption rate at a firm level. But Susie goes on to explain some of the initiatives that firms are doing to encourage their partners and encourage their kind of more junior associates to use the tools effectively in their day-to-day.
There's a brilliant quote in there from Bruce McEwen, president of New York law consultancy Adam Smith. I'm just going to read it. He says, If there were a ranking for the most current and widely discussed topic among law firm leaders over the last few decades, AI would win hands down. But so far, the evidence is that's all it is, discussed. So there you go.
Lovely stuff. And I think it ends on a cautionary note from Searle, the barrister that Susie's spoken to, that despite the usage of AI in his practice, there still needs to be a degree of empathy and judgment from a human to make that decision,
right,
which I think is something that the professionals stand by. And next up is a piece from The Times by Jonathan Ames, reporting that English legal firms encroaching on Scotland as rule overhaul demanded. What did you make of this piece, Ben? It's not Scotland isn't a jurisdiction that we chat a lot about.
No, and I'm reminded that it's a legal powerhouse, Scotland, and also that the ABS rules, which came in here, nearly 20 years ago in 2007, don't apply there. So the old stricter ownership rules still apply in Scotland, and this story is built around the fact that a couple of firms, English firms, Higgs and Stowe, which are private equity backed, are looking to grow in Scotland. But they're struggling because their ownership means that they have to flex that in some shape or form to do business in Scotland. And there's a lot of campaigning going on for Scotland to have the similar relaxation of rules that we had here back 20 years ago. And I would argue that actually they should, because, with Brexit, legal services is probably along with financial services, one of our biggest sort of powerful industries. And to make consolidation and growth more complex within the boundaries of our island seems to be a bit counterintuitive after the Brexit vote. So I'm with the campaigners. Let's change the rules.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and then finally was a piece that we spotted, a really fascinating piece of research this week from Thomson Reuters, looking at in-house legal teams. And the stat that jumped out to me here was that 86% of the general counsel they spoke to believe they are a significant contributor to business success, but only 17% of the C-suite agree. That's obviously a pretty stark gap. It's clear that there is a bit of a value gap here, essentially. Is it a communication problem? Are GCs not delivering the value. I find that quite hard to believe. But what does it mean for businesses?
This subject has been on the table for a long time. A frustration in the GC community that they haven't quite got a seat at the highest table within, I guess, big corporates and PLCs. Certainly been a theme for a long time. I would have hoped that I might have changed by now. And my own view is that, compliance, legal, etc., is still seen perhaps as a slightly sort of distressed purchase in the same way as insurance is by leaders. The other thing in this piece, which is great, is that legal departments are seen as really, really innovative, an understanding about how to deliver value, AI, and data-driven strategy. So they're cutting edge in terms of how they deliver the work that they do. But again, I think we see that over the last 20 years or so, the strides to bring GCs around the highest table haven't been quite as numerous as we would have wanted. I think it's a really good study, very thorough.
And I mean, thinking, from a crisis communication standpoint, a lot of issues that companies face start out as legal issues, right? So being able to have a GC in your board, or at least in your crisis response is key, I think, for companies that are dealing with it, especially in today's climate as well. What do you think? How could they bridge that gap? Like, how do you communicate the value that you're delivering to a business if 86% of general counsel believe that they're a significant contributor?
I suspect. I mean, this is guesswork on my part. It's been a long time since I worked in a PLC. I did many years ago. But I think what tends to happen is that something will happen, or a company will want to do something, and the feeling is let's send it down to legal. Let's make sure that we are bulletproof from a legal perspective. So they come in as a sort of almost an insurance, an insurance to make sure whether it's a positive, negative development, is executed in a way where you're not going to get sued or there's going to be a problem. But really, what the GCs want is to be part of that decision-making process, not to deal with the aftermath of it.
I would say that's kind of applicable for heads of comms in a lot of situations.
Now you're talking.
As well.
Now you're talking. That's a whole different kettle of fish. Yeah. We've got a problem here. Ex-journalist has just called, this has happened. What should we do? Yeah.
Another episode, perhaps. And something slightly different that caught our eye this week for very, very different reasons is a legal battle between Vogue and, how are we saying it? Dogue?
Well, I don't know. Is it dog with a UE, or is it? I think it is, or is it Dogue? So I like a quirky story, and
at least it's not the toilet one again.
No, I'm not doing anything scatological this week. But there in LA, there is a lady who's sort of created what I can best describe as a fanzine, if people remember those, for dogs. And she sells 100 copies from one little stand in New York, and she's called it either Dogue or Dog, Dogue, and it's a pastiche of Vogue covers. So instead of models, you have dogs dressed up.
Yeah.
So clearly, you'd have to be really not fully functioning to associate the two and not realize that it's a nice little pastiche, but Condé Nast, or Condé Nasty, as one reader called them, has decided to sue this poor lady. And I think that's terrible. There are so many stories, aren't there, of big corporates, having their trademark and copyright infringed by either small traders or individuals, and being very humorless and suing them. But I think it's so short-termist because the coverage in the Times, for example, is significant. So if they're worried about their brand equity and their values, behaving in such a humorless way is probably not going to be what they're looking for. They would have been better off just maybe quietly sending a cease and desist, whatever it's called, letter, or just, letting it go.
Yeah, or leaning into it. I mean, you can see if they a lovely partnership where the lady is on the next front cover of Vogue. You kind of see that brands being able to tap into these zeitgeisty things. Obviously, dogs on social media is hugely popular and it's not going anywhere. So, I think it should be something to be embraced.
Yeah. Good.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Counsel Culture, and we will speak to you again soon.
Yeah, but it doesn't work.
Just if you can't hear me, it says this is the whole reason we've got headphones. It's just better sound quality. There's even a button to check on this that says, "Why are you fiddling with everything? It's all set up and ready to go."
I know, but I can't hear you.
The microphone. Okay. Welcome to Counsel Culture. Why are you just touching everything? Talk into the mic, otherwise I don't know if it's working.